Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Pleasure Principles, the podcast where we take high performance insights, emotional intelligence, and guess even a bit of soul work and apply it to the wild, messy, beautiful landscapes of modern relationships. I'm your host Avik, and today's episode, yeah, it's the one for the thinkers, the doers, and everyone in between who's ever asked, like, why are our relationships so hard? And uh, can we lead them like we led billion-dollar companies? It's a great question, right? So, my guest today is someone who can answer that question better than most. So, Tom Hagerty. So, welcome to the show, Tom.
Hi, Avik. How are you? I'm glad to be here today.
Lovely, lovely. So, Tom, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Tom is a retired corporate executive and business fixer with over 45 years of experience. And he's spoken at major events like penned thought provoking op-eds and authored the eye-opening book, The Business of Relationships, in that order. And let me tell you guys, the title says it all. Yes. And in a world where our relationships are crumbling under the weight of disconnection, division, and distraction, Tom suggests something bold. So let's take a page out of the CEO playbook from Ford to Sandberg, Buffet to Roddick. The business world has a lot to teach us about love, trust, and yes, even forgiveness. So, dear listeners, buckle up because today we are diving into uh, this topic that could radically shift how you relate to your partner, your team, your kids, or even yourself. So, welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks a lot, Avik. I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I
Lovely.
thought your introduction was perfect.
Thank you, Tom. So Tom, I'll start with your book. Like when your book dives into like how business wisdom can help us develop the personal relationships. So if you can tell us like what's the one business principle that people most underestimate when it comes to the relationships?
Well, I think when you look at CEOs today, think about the fact that they are basically paid to create relationships, to create good relationships. A
Hmm.
CEO is not going to be successful if they do not have good relationships with their customers, their colleagues and coworkers, their
Hmm.
shareholders, their investors, their vendors. All of those things are critical to having a successful, thriving company. And with the CEO at the helm leading the charge, that's their fundamental job is to
Hmm.
create relationships that thrive.
Yeah.
And what I say, Avik, is, and this is in the book, that too infrequently do we appreciate their wisdom that goes beyond the boardroom, that transcends the shareholder letter. These are people that are highly educated, highly motivated, very interesting people, very engaged with the world around them. And yet we seem to want to take advice from the movie star of the moment or the sports figure of the day or some other pundit that coins a phrase or invents an acronym, and the relationship that the CEO establishes is one of permanence. And I think too often we overlook that. And there are many, many examples of their wisdom transcending the boardroom, like I said. And I believe if we pay more attention to that and apply some of
Mhm.
that wisdom to our personal relationships, we're going to thrive in areas that are essential to our success.
Mhm. That's amazing perspective. I say, yeah. So, like, when someone hears that and thinks, uh, but that sounds cold, business is cutthroat. relationships are emotional. So how do you bridge that gap?
Well, I bridge the gap quite simply. I don't think and have never thought that business is cutthroat, because in order to be cutthroat, what you're saying is I will destroy the competition at all costs. I will disregard the customer's wishes. I will short circuit my employees' input at every chance I have. And none of that is true today. Now, it may have been, 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago that it was a bit more competitive and ruthless than it is now. But right now, with the advent of social media, with the advent of AI, with the advent of workers' rights around the world, um, I think it's a much more collaborative environment than the casual observer would like to admit. It's an easy stereotype to say that there isn't a good business leader out there, that they're all cutthroat guys, that they're all out for themselves, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Exactly. That's very true. Yeah. And I really love that because emotions don't have to um, mean the chaos, and structure doesn't have to mean rigidity. So maybe clarity, like in business, is actually kindness in relationships. What do you say on this?
Well, again, I would say that the fundamental qualities of relationships, and this transcends a lot of different venues, Avik. I mean, when I was doing research for the book, I looked at publications that were as diverse as the Harvard Business Review, Northwestern Medical Journal. I looked at websites like marriage.com. I even looked at the news outlets in America here, NBC News, CBS, CNN, and so forth. And when it came to relationships, all of these different venues seem to gravitate toward about 12 essential qualities of a good personal relationship. If you're going to be in a thriving personal relationship, you've got to have perspective. You've got to have honesty. You have to have trust and integrity. You have to have a sense of risk and change. You have to have priority, establishing another person as your priority. There is respect, there's engagement, humility, resilience. Those are all essential qualities in a good personal relationship. And what I found is that many of the business leaders in their various quotes that I used in my book, they they spotlighted those kind of qualities. They talk about respect for others. They talk about establishing priorities, having a sense of resilience, being open to and willing to change. So uh, I think, when you look at those fundamental qualities, you can very quickly, in my mind, see how some of these quotes can apply to those.
Hmm. True. Exactly. So, like, a line I love from your book was Malcolm Forbes quote, which is,
Yep.
um, if you correct me if I'm wrong somewhere. If you never budge, don't expect uh, the push. So let's talk about flexibility. Uh, so I mean, why do so many relationships suffer because of the ego, and how can humility be a superpower? What would you say on this?
Well, I think humility is absolutely a superpower. And when you look at Malcolm Forbes' quote, when he said that, here's a guy, Avik, that was never a saint. Okay. He never positioned himself as a saint. He was a philanderer, a womanizer. He liked to have more than one drink. Um, you know, he 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 did some things in the business world that were very creative with his publication, but he also indulged himself frequently, big birthday parties, lots of money spent, lots of playing around. Uh, but the quote resonated to me not because of his, uh, orientation to life as much as it was what it said. And when you pick that quote apart and you say, if you don't budge, meaning that if you aren't willing to change, if you aren't willing to consider an alternative viewpoint, if you aren't willing to think about your demeanor and your relations with other people, if you don't budge on that, if you say I'm right 100% of the time, then you can't expect people in your life to continue to push because we get tired. We get tired of that kind of a person, the one who is always right, always has the best viewpoint, always has the best idea. So I think flexibility, it speaks to that. It also spoke to me in terms of the quality of change, more than anything else, that we have to, in a relationship, not just be flexible, because we all could be flexible. We can say, yeah, that's not a bad idea, Avik. I understand. And then we go about doing things the way we always did them. I think his quote speaks more dramatically to the essence of actual change, that in order to have someone push me,
Mm.
I have to be willing to change. I have to take that step, not just put it into words, but actually take the step. And
Man.
and that is essential in the quality of humility as well.
Mm. Exactly. Wow. So, uh, like, have you
I mean,
ever seen? Yeah, yeah. Please, please.
well, here's another one that I,
Mm.
you know, had a lot of fun writing about, because I think the
Okay.
quote can be
Mm.
uh, applicable in depth to a lot of our failures in relationships. Uh, Jack Welch was the chairman and CEO of General Electric back in the 80s and 90s. He was honored as being the executive of the century, not the moment or the day or the month or the year. He was the executive of the century, tripled shareholder value for General Electric in his 20 years as CEO. And Jack Welch was a tough guy. I worked at GE back in those days, and Jack was a tough CEO. He instilled a merit-based culture, and it was not uncommon that you lost 10% of your workforce every year because he just chopped the bottom 10%, and said, we'll move on without them. Um, Jack Welch had a quote that goes like this: change before you have to.
Mm.
Now, that quote was in a speech that he gave to his business leaders of the various GE businesses, aircraft engines and medical and finance and so forth. He gave that speech, and what he said to them was, if you're not number one or number two in your marketplace, I will fix you, close you, or sell you. So change before you have to. Now, that is a real call to action to his executive team: change before you have to. But when I considered that quote for the book, I looked at it and said, that speaks to me about the essential, you know, um, orientation to changing before you have to, that budding addiction,
Yeah.
that financial irresponsibility that is driving your family, crazy, the passive aggressive nature that you exhibit with your children, the cavalier attitude that you exhibit with your friends and neighbors and golf partners or whatever. Uh, change before you have to. And that was a powerful message to me. Like I said, I had a lot of fun writing about that and trying for it to be instructive to people in their relationships as well. And that's an important thing to stress here when we talk about my book, is none of these quotes were given in the context in which I applied them. No business executive was saying, I'm talking about relationships here. What they were talking about was business, as in Jack's case and Malcolm Forbes and all the others. So that's an important distinction. I think it's all in the interpretation and how we uh, allow ourselves to grow by being instructed by people that are wiser than us.
Exactly. I mean, that's real. That's really real. Sometimes, um, the most courageous thing that, uh, uh, again, it's what I feel, but I think that we can do is like, um, kind of apologize first, ask the hard question first, or say I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. That
Right.
uh, that's something which I feel definitely. Yeah. But amazing. I mean, I really love those quotes. Really. So, dear listeners, I'll definitely suggest please go have a look into the book, and you'll love that for sure. Yes, you were saying something. Yes, please.
No, no, no. I said there are so many of these.
Mm,
The one that I really enjoyed, a couple of them from our female executives.
mm,
Sheryl Sandberg said, each one of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done.
mm,
And when you begin to unpack that and you think about that, it spoke to me about resilience. And Cheryl said that quote. Here's a lady, Avik, that I'm sure you know of her, but you know
mm,
she she had a great deal of success in government. She was the administrative assistant to the Secretary of the Treasury during the Clinton administration. She moved away from government, went to Google, and really taught Google how to make money with advertising. Before that, Google was foundering. It was a great technology, but it had no way to gain revenue. She basically taught them and instituted the advertising culture there. Then she moves on to Facebook, pretty much does the same thing there. But
mm,
that quote came from a speech that she gave when she was talking about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. If you remember back to 2016 in the presidential election, Google was
mm,
pretty much accused and then convicted of selling information to the Trump
mm,
campaign and the Ted Cruz campaigns, selling user information, and it was a scandal. And she took the blame for it. She was thrown under the bus, so to speak. But when she said that quote, it was very much in a business context. Each one of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done.
mm,
And I looked at it and said, wow, that's a pretty heavy statement to make. It's pretty,
yeah.
pretty, she's very self-aware when she made a statement like that. But it spoke
Mm,
to me about resilience in relationships, that we need to go to our partner, go to ourselves in self-reflection, go to trusted
mm,
advisors, and
yeah.
let them help us overcome the worst thing we've ever done, because we're more than that. We can't get mired in that. And so powerful stuff to me.
Amazing, I have to say.
Thank you.
Lovely. And yeah, really. So, Tom, really, thank you so much for bringing such grounded and soulful and unexpected insights in today's conversation, because I believe this is something which, dear listeners, you will nowhere find. Uh, just again, I'll suggest do have a look on those quotes. You'll love it. You'll learn a lot of this. So, also, like Tom, I mean, you have definitely reminded us that leadership isn't just for the boardrooms, it's for the bedrooms, living rooms, dinner tables, and uh, even in the silent spaces where relationships either grow or die. So, with this,
I,
like
I
for all the listeners, if, yeah, please, Tom.
no, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think our relationships right now
Mm,
are in life support, in a lot of
yeah.
ways. We have data out there that is showing that bad relationships are an $8 trillion problem in American business, in business worldwide. Uh,
Mm,
those employees who are in bad relationships and bringing that to the workplace, they are 37% absent more than the regular workforce. So they have a 37% increase in absenteeism. They are 63% more likely to quit abruptly, without notice. And the collateral damage here is the one that I really, spend a lot of time reflecting on and seeing how we can change the metric. But the collateral damage is that, again, I'm here in America, so I'm speaking about our data, but I would suspect that this transitions throughout many other cultures and many other, you know, um, countries, and that is that our children are 3 times more likely to grow up in a single parent household than the worldwide average. I don't know if that transitions for India. I think different cultures incentivize marriage more strongly than we do here in America. Divorce is almost looked at as a byproduct of a relationship, which is a tragic shame. But even so, even if it didn't exactly transition to India and other cultures, when you say that you're in the most powerful country in the world, the most rich country in the world economically, the driver of the world's business or the world's economy, and yet you're saying my children are 3 times more likely to grow up in a single parent household than the rest of the world. That's incredibly sad to me, and we have this epidemic of loneliness and depression and anxiety. It's it's tragic, and I think we can do so much more for our relationships. Certainly listening to the CEO, that's why I wrote the book. I think their wisdom transcends the boardroom, like you and I have talked about. But I think more importantly, it's even if it just isn't the CBO, even if it's other resources, we have to do something to get in the way of these failed relationships, which are infecting all of us.
Exactly. Lovely, lovely, great. Um, I mean, I have to say, like, for all the listeners, if your relationships feel out of alignment, maybe it's time to lead them differently, not with the power, but with the presence, and not by controlling, but by listening. So, grab a copy of The Business of Relationships. I'll put all the links into the show notes for your easy reference, dear listeners. And this is your host, Avik, signing off from Pleasure Principles. Keep showing up, keep choosing connection, and as always, lead with the love. So, thank you so much.